If someone had warned me about the consequences of doing inner work or starting with inner work, first of all, I wouldn't have understood what they meant. Back then, and I think I would have still taken the decision to still do the inner work because it's just who I am. I like to learn, I like to constantly improve. And so I have made notes here on my iPad, and I will be referring to them. They're not really visible and my screen is a bit messed up, but yeah, I'll be referring to the notes when I look down. So basically, what is inner work? I think there's so many different definitions of what inner work is online, but my definition of what inner work is, or what it has been to me, is basically intentional work on yourself to be either a different version of you, like completely different, like a 180 if you choose to, or an improved or better version of yourself. And emphasis on being. So yes, you can change your whole wardrobe, change how you present yourself to the world. That is changing how you look, right? You could also change how you walk or how you speak. It's still surface level. In my opinion, I feel like inner work is the stuff that is not seen, where you work on the parts of you that other people don't really see, but maybe get to experience the after effects of who you are. So hence I emphasized on it being the inner work that you do on yourself to be a different person or a different version of yourself. And like I said, it's not usually visible or aesthetic, but I think eventually it then leads to that, like looking better or more put together is then a side effect of inner work eventually, but that is not what it is at its core. So, and when you are doing inner work or when you started, usually people around you who've known you for a long time will start to point out that something is different, but they won't even be able to put a finger on what it is that is different, because maybe you're still wearing the same clothes, maybe you still speak or walk the same way, but because you're doing a work internally, the way you show up in different situations will be different. So how can inner work be done? Inner work, I think, can happen through different methods, right? So some people who are religious, I am not religious at all, but some people who are religious follow, they would do inner work that could be triggered from church or mosque or whatever religious association that they have, right? Other people start inner work with therapy, right? And then some, because they go to therapy, they feel like they need help, and so that sort of begins the process of inner work. I would like to say my inner work, okay, I'm just looking at my notes again. My inner work started when I felt out of control and I needed help. So context, I know it sounds so like simple, but I am the eldest daughter, eldest child in my family, and also eldest granddaughter on my mother's side. So if you know, you know, that can come with like a lot of control issues. Also based on how I was raised, there was a lot of responsibility that was put upon me, and I kept on hearing that other people, my siblings, were looking up to me, and so there was this pressure to always be a certain way. And I think to the best of my ability, I showed up that way until I got to a point where in my personal life now, where I felt like, okay, I'm out of solutions, I'm crumbling, and there's not really anyone I can turn to, because I'd sort of created this like hyper independence thing about myself, feeling like if I don't show up, then no one's going to show up for me. And I'm so grateful for a friend of mine who reluctantly said, maybe you should try therapy. And I used to be one of those people who thought, but therapy is not for me. I went to therapy, and I will be vulnerable here. My first therapy session, I guess I can disclose that, right? Because I'm the patient. Therapist asked me, why are you here? And I said, I need help. And in saying that, I broke down and cried, and nothing else happened in that therapy session. I just cried because I kept on saying, I need help. And that for me was like a turning point in my life where I don't want to say I humbled myself, but the situation that I found myself in humbled me. And that's when my intentional inner work had begun. So I generally am a girl. I like nice things. I like to look cute. But it wasn't inner work. And when I started with that process, with that journey of I need help, that's when I started my inner work, looking at trying to understand who I am as a person. Like, okay, I need help with this situation, but asking myself questions, how did I get myself in this situation? I think it's easier to put the blame on circumstances that are beyond our control, and of which sometimes this can be true, that we find ourselves in families or some dynamics that are really out of our control. But the honest truth is we do participate in that. Maybe not initially triggered, but we do participate and contribute to those situations. And so in that moment, I started asking myself, okay, I found myself in the situation. It's not something that I intentionally created, but how did I show up in this? How did I contribute to this situation? And I think that's where my breakthrough came through, where I stopped putting the blame on other people. I stopped giving other people responsibility for the situation that I found myself in. Yes, they had contributed, but I also contributed, whether it was by me staying silent in the situation, by me not voicing my opinion, by me not checking in with myself with how I feel about something. And so that's how inner work started for me, and wanting to understand, okay, yes, I didn't speak up. Yes, I didn't say anything. Yes, this is how I contributed. But then I asked myself, why? Why did I do that? And I'm not a big fan of trying to blame things also on childhood. Yes, childhood does, shape how we view the world and how we experience the world. But there is that story that goes something like, there were two sons. The father was an alcoholic. One did not drink alcohol and was highly successful. And they asked him, why are you so highly successful? Why don't you drink alcohol? And his response was, because my father was an alcoholic. And the other son was an alcoholic, drank so much, had done nothing with his life, was asked, why are you the way that you are? And he said, because my father was an alcoholic. So it was circumstances that two children were put in that was very similar, but they had different outcomes. And so that also helped in me sort of looking at, okay, yes, there were circumstances in my childhood that were beyond my control that shaped the way that I viewed the world up to a certain point. But why did I respond the way that I did? And also, do I have a choice in the matter? Like, can I change the way that I show up in the world? And when I started on that journey, I feel like a lot of things then changed in terms of, first of all, me being aware of myself, understanding myself, and seeing myself. I feel like we are ourselves, but we don't even know who we are, And I think in that journey, I actually got to realize who I was as a person. Before I started intentionally changing something, at that point, realizing, okay, this is who I am. And seeing that person and having mixed emotions about the person that I was seeing in the mirror. Who is this? Do I like her? What about her do I not like? What about her makes me feel uncomfortable? What things did she do to survive? What things did she do to thrive? What things is she not great at it? And I know I'm speaking in the third person, but that's how I sort of processed inner work, where I sort of tried to remove myself from the situation. And while I'm saying it as an intellectual process or a mental process, it was deeply emotional and very spiritual as well. Like I said, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, if I can put it that way. So once I got to see who I was, the next step for me was accepting who I am, or who I was, or that version of me, accepting, loving, and forgiving the parts of myself that had showed up in a way that worked against me previously, you know? So that is how like my inner work journey sort of unfolded. And how did I do this inner work? So like I said, I was in therapy for a time, and then I decided to take on responsibility, started to listen to content, not content audios or like specialists who were like great in their field, like different podcasts that were very helpful, that made me sort of think, helped me unpack certain things. I was journaling. I spoke to different people about different aspects of my life that I felt they were excelling in, that they could sort of contribute to me and be like a mirror for me, an objective mirror. And they were not necessarily people that were in my life personally, but people who were in my network that I had access to. And so I took advantage of that. Some people believe in coaches. I can't say I've had a coach, but I guess those people I was leaning into were sort of coaching me in the different aspects of my life. Yeah, what else? And then I read books as well. I think one of my videos I spoke about the different books that I've read, and those were not all of the books, but those books helped me sort of reflect and be aware of certain things and start working towards them. Being aware of my subconscious and the power that it has, and seeing and understanding what was in my subconscious, and then unlearning certain things to relearn certain things. So that was like a whole thing. I'm looking at my notes again. So with all of this, I know it might sound like, okay, so what's the problem? What do you wish you were warned about? So the first thing that I wish I had been warned about was that it never actually stops. You think, okay, you see something, like let's say, let me take for example, anger, right? You see that there's a temper problem maybe, and you're like, okay, I'm going to work on that. And then somehow you unpack that and you realize, okay, at least for me, I realized I was angry because there's so many underlying emotions with that hurt, injustice that I had been feeling. And then you unpack all of that, and then you do the work, and then now you get to a point where you don't have a temper problem anymore. But then you think, okay, now you're done. But actually you realize, no, there's more work to be done, because now those things that sort of made you angry before, there are still emotions that need to be unpacked, and you can go down that rabbit hole. And also forgiving yourself for maybe some of the things that you could have done or said in anger, and also accepting that version of yourself that you were protecting yourself, or that anger might have been a way of protecting yourself. So that's the thing, like you think you do this thing and it's a tick box. No, it keeps on, it's very layered, like we're very layered individuals, or maybe, yeah, we're very layered individuals. And so you realize that there's more work required. Or maybe you are able to unpack something completely and you think it's done. But as soon as that is done, you become aware of something else that also needs to be worked on. So that's the first warning, that once you start, it never stops. You constantly want to improve yourself or work on things, especially when you've tried certain things and they are working, and you also get a high or some satisfaction from the achievement of a certain goal. So that's the first warning. The next thing is that seeing yourself, right? So when you see yourself and accept yourself and are able to forgive yourself, I feel like only then can you actually start loving yourself. because you can't love something you don't know. You can't love something you don't understand. And when you get to that place with yourself, where you see yourself, where you love yourself, you start loving yourself, and not loving yourself aesthetically, like, okay, putting on some makeup, looking cute, like the deep, like, loving of yourself and taking care of yourself, or as I've heard some other people say, like reparenting yourself, or therapists say reparenting yourself, like deeply caring about yourself. And that also is another unending thing, right? And then once you see yourself and you accept yourself, and you accept that you are a constant work in progress, and you love yourself regardless, and you're constantly forgiving yourself and growing, learning and unlearning, unfortunately you start to see other people as well. And you realize that some people are not even aware of themselves. Like I said, like we think we know ourselves, but we don't. Other people, they're not even aware of themselves, and you start to see them. And how you then see them can change certain things about how you perceive them, and not in a bad way. Sometimes you realize, okay, this person shows up in the world like this, and this is why they're experiencing the world a certain way, based on how you have unpacked yourself, right? And you start to see their micro expressions, their microaggressions, their responses to you or to different situations, and how sometimes they might be working on autopilot when they could actually choose responses or reactions in situations. And that's also another thing, that once you start doing inner work, you will hardly be on autopilot. You will mostly be present enough to pick up with the moment something changes, and how your energy shifts, and how something makes you feel uncomfortable. Before I had done inner work, I would experience something, I wouldn't even be aware that my emotions have shifted, and then later on start wondering, why am I feeling irritable? Like maybe an hour or a day later, it's because of an interaction that I had with an individual. Whereas now, because I'm mostly present, I immediately, when something happens, I feel it. And I might not understand why I feel it, but I am aware that I have felt something shifted, something's off. And that's something that I wish someone had warned me about, because now you can't switch that off. And even seeing other people and seeing the energy that they bring, how they show up in the world. Once you see yourself, you see other people clearly, and then that's something you can't switch off. So I wish someone had warned me about that. And then the next thing is relationships. Your relationships will change. The way you show up in your relationships will change, with family, with friends, with lovers. I don't believe in loss. I believe that things transition, or things come through their term, like in your life. But the way you start experiencing people is different, and because you are different, it changes how your relationships are. And in my experience, I feel like eventually it's always for the good, because you are a better version of yourself, and so you demand better without actually using words. Like, just because you are a different person, different things start to happen. Different things start to show up in your life, and so in alignment with who you are, not how you present yourself, but who you actually are. So that's something that I wish I had been warned about. And then you are low-key always out of your comfort zone, because you're constantly learning and unlearning, and you're present. So the comfort zone becomes almost like a myth, if I can put it that way. But I feel like if you're doing it correctly, holistically, that is mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and otherwise, and physically as well, because I've also been more active, been to the gym, my body's getting more and more like how I like it. Each time I look in the mirror, I like how I am taking care of myself physically as well. So once you start doing things, once you start taking care of yourself and doing all of that inner work that can then manifest in the physical space, you are more at peace with yourself, even when you're constantly out of your comfort zone. So yeah, that's just a random, it's not random actually, it was very intentional, and I felt I wanted to share that. And maybe someone is on their journey, and maybe those things that are uncomfortable with maybe relationships changing or seeing themselves makes them feel uncomfortable. I feel like it's worth it. I think once you go through it, not push through it, but allow the process to happen, eventually you'll get to a place where you find peace in the chaos. Because just because you've done inner work doesn't mean everything outside you changes to align with that. Sometimes it stays chaotic. Sometimes there are things that will always be out of our control. Yes, more things come that are in alignment with who you are. Like if you are usually like a drama seeking person, when you start to become more peaceful or grounded, you'll find that people who also like drama are no longer finding themselves around you, and you find yourself gravitating towards people who are more peaceful or who are not very drama centric. And vice versa, the peaceful people also gravitate towards you. So those are things in the external that will sort of mirror how you're feeling inside. However, the world is still the world, and there can be situations or circumstances that are outside of our control. And even with that being said, you still find peace and acceptance with whatever's going on around you. I hope that made sense to someone. I hope it helps someone. But I just felt so strong about sharing that. So yeah, see you soon.